I think that oftentimes college football fan bases can be echo chambers. If you're in the office in Lafayette or Shreveport or Mandeville, like you're probably talking LSU or the Saints. That's the case most places. Like if you're in Mississippi, yeah, you may have a Mississippi State fan and an Ole Miss fan. If you're in Alabama, you may have an Alabama fan and an Auburn fan. But like the blood runs purple and gold here in the state of Louisiana. So everyone's kind of hyper-focused on the exact same thing. And at times we don't really look outside of where we are. And as I just detailed, like that doesn't mean that just because everybody else isn't okay, that's fine that LSU is not reaching its potential. That's not the point of this at all. The point of this was I was kind of looking up at LSU football and I'm thinking, LSU fans are not happy after year 3 of Brian Kelly. And I don't think anybody involved with LSU football feels like LSU has reached the point that it needs to under Brian Kelly. He said implicitly, I'm here to, because it has the resources to win a national championship. He said in the post-game press conference this year, see you at the national championship. So this is not something that Brian Kelly's unaware of, that everybody else on that staff and in that locker room is unaware of. Everybody knows at LSU the standard is competing for championships, and they have not done that through 3 years. And because of that, Brian Kelly's approval level is, I think, low. But that can change pretty quickly. Just got to go win some games. So I wanted to look around the SEC and go, well, what coaches have a high approval rate? And I would suggest, sitting here, that there are 2 programs in the SEC that think, we got the guy, let's roll. I think Georgia feels that way. Kirby Smart's got 2 national championships. They almost never lose 2 games. This year they had the hardest schedule in the country, and they did lose 2 games. They still got into the playoff, and their backup quarterback went out there and lost the Sugar Bowl. But Georgia fans, anyone that's reasonable thinks we're good. Now, they're not the immortal team they were 3 years ago, but Georgia's got their guy. And I would suggest Texas feels like we got our guy. Steve Sarkisian has gotten Texas to playoff 2 years in a row. They're competitive in a new league. The NIL is rolling. They feel like Arch Manning's going to be good. Like, I think Texas fans feel like they haven't reached the top of the mountain, but they're in a good spot. I think those 2 programs think we got our guy. There are 2 programs that I think are right under that. Lane Kiffin has certainly elevated Ole Miss. He's elevated them from a doormat in the SEC West that never reached Atlanta to a nationally relevant program. However, they went out there this year and lost 3 football games, including 1 to Kentucky and 1 to Florida, with a team that they spent nearly $20 million on. So while I think that that's an elevation of the program, is everybody completely sold on Lane Kiffin? I don't know. That's a troubling thing when you've got Walter Nolan and Princey Umamielen leaving and Trey Amos leaving, and Quinshon Judkins is gone and Jackson Dart's leaving and Trey Harris is out of there. And I mean, they got to replace a lot of stuff. And I'm telling you, the 2 guys they got out of Baton Rouge, if you think that's going to fix things, I got news for you. So I'm not 100% sold that everybody thinks that Lane Kiffin is the guy. I think everyone in Knoxville, Tennessee feels like they've upgraded from Derek Dooley and Butch Jones and Jeremy Pruitt, certainly. But, okay, you're not beating Georgia. You got smashed in the shoe. You hadn't been to Atlanta. Like, it's better, but you got to take another step. So while I think Ole Miss and Tennessee feel pretty good about things, there's still some doubt there, and I don't know that the approval rate is higher than 80% there. Well, I think it is in Austin and Athens. After that, you've got 11 programs outside of LSU that I think have some real doubts here. Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt have had a nice year, but who's Missouri's biggest win this year? It's either 6-7 Oklahoma or Vanderbilt in Columbia in overtime. South Carolina, well, last year, South Carolina went 5-7, and Shane Beamer's 29-22. So, yeah, I mean, it could be worse, but they're not completely sold. They just went 5-7 a year ago. They just lost their bowl game to Illinois. And then you got Vanderbilt, who feels good about Clark Lee, but I don't care because it's Vanderbilt. And then you start talking about teams that may have like under 50% approval rating. Mike Elko's probably above that, but they did just disintegrate in November. Lost 4 of 5. Both teams in the state of Alabama, I think, have a far under 50% approval rating of their coach. Hugh Freeze has won squat in Auburn, and they think that what just happened with Kalen DeBoer is unthinkable, that you could possibly lose 4 games. And I think Arkansas, Kentucky, and Oklahoma are firing a coach before Christmas. So Arkansas, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Auburn, Alabama, Texas A&M, and then I hadn't even talked about Mississippi State, who didn't win a game this year in the league. You think that Billy Napier's safe because of what happened in November? They just wanted to run him out of town. That's 8 teams that I know are not very happy. Then what do you think about Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt? I would suggest, well, who really cares? Because they're not playing for the same thing LSU is. So it's the point I'm making here is like the sport, generally speaking, creates unhappy fan bases. I would suggest that far more than half of the SEC fan bases are at least uneasy, if not disgruntled, with the product of their football program. And it is not just the SEC. Like, look at the teams that just played in the playoff. Are we sure Penn State fans are happy because James Franklin lost the Big Ten championship game to Oregon and then beat SMU and Boise and then couldn't win in the game to get them to the game? Ohio State, 98% of the fan base wanted to fire Ryan Day 6 weeks ago. They're about to win the national championship. That's how quickly you can go from happy to unhappy and then back to happy. So the moral of this story is not for me to tell you, the LSU fan, hey, don't worry about Brian Kelly hadn't done it in 3 years. Like, nobody else is really doing it either. That is not the point. Not the point at all. The point is that this sport breeds unhappiness because so few teams reach where their expectation thinks they should be. Now, that said, it is time for Brian Kelly to do that, and I think everyone is well aware of that. You've now changed your approach 2 different times. Once, you overhauled the entire defensive staff. A second time, you went to the transfer portal harder than you ever have. And you've, to his credit, done that and altered the fabric of the football program entering 2025. I don't care if Ole Miss underachieved this year. I don't care if Tennessee hadn't climbed the mountain. I don't care if Missouri feels like they're doing really well. I don't care if Vanderbilt thinks they're about to go to 3 straight bowl games. I don't care what Shane Beamer does in South Carolina outside of when they come to Tiger Stadium next year. The point is, it's time to get that approval level back where it needs to be. I just wanted to add a little context for the LSU fan who only at the water cooler at the office or in the church pew or in the family group text or in the family dinner table or is only thinking about LSU all the time, to take a step back this time of year and go, you know, this is pretty common stuff. Doesn't make it okay. It just means that it is the case for most teams around the country, certainly those that have real expectations. I don't care what Washington State fans think about their football program. I don't even know what conference they're in. But I do think it is relevant at times, not when we walk out of Tiger Stadium after you've gotten beat by Alabama by 40 points and Jalen Milroe ran like crazy. That's not the time and place for this exercise, okay? That's the time and place to go, this is not acceptable. Something's got to change. That's okay. But this time of year, when we, as you all have heard me talk about my college football calendar, where most people are ticked off in November, and I just rattled off all the teams that would have been ticked in November, and then you get a new signing class in. Well, this guy's going to be awesome. That guy's going to be awesome. Look at these portal ads. Oh, you changed coordinators. That side of the ball is going to be way better. Then you go to spring practice, and all your practice reports are positive. Then the strength coach gets out there in the summer and tells you that these guys are in the best shape they've ever been, and that guy's recovered off his torn ACL, and this all looks great. And then you get to fall practice, and then it reaches a fever pitch. Everybody thinks that they're the sleeper team, or they're got the dominant team, and this quarterback's going to be awesome, and this guy's going to take a next step. That's the natural progression of this thing that happens everywhere, not just Baton Rouge, every year. And so we're restarting that right now. And so at this point in the calendar, I think it's reasonable for me, as a guy who's covering LSU and certainly has LSU at the root of his entire interest, to go, how different, how big an outlier is LSU here? The answer is not. That's one piece of it. The other part of it is, now it's time to become an outlier. Now it's time to become one of the teams that feels like things are on the right track. And they're saying the same thing in Tuscaloosa, and they're saying the same thing in Auburn. They're saying the same thing at Florida. They're saying the same thing at Ole Miss. There are more teams now that have college football playoff aspirations, a more realistic goal. And it's time for LSU to climb that mountain, to make that happen. I just think let's just take a brief peek at what's going on elsewhere and see just how this sport actually works. Because I'm telling you that Ryan Day is going to be up with confetti falling all over the place on Monday, holding a trophy after they beat Notre Dame by 20 points. And you realize that that fan base felt this way 6 weeks ago. That's how quickly things turn. And I think it's fascinating. I think it's one of the great things about sports. Passion, energy, focus, support, all those things make sports great. They can also, in an echo chamber, create some toxicity. This is the time to kind of diffuse that a little bit. I personally think LSU's football team next year is going to be significantly better than the one we just saw. I did not think that in early November. Now I do. We'll see. Time will tell. We'll have all summer to talk about it. But I thought an exercise worthwhile. I'll have a column up on it at louisianasports.net coming up later this afternoon. Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.